Hey y'all, this is your girl Cash of 40 and No Filters, and today we're going to be wrapping up How Instagram Saved My Life, Part 3. Now, I've already uploaded videos 1 and 2, so if you haven't seen those yet, I would recommend going and watching those first. But today we're going to be talking about Part 3 and just closing out how I advocated for myself. A quick summary: Part 1 consisted of me just telling you how I found out that I had a tumor, and also how I found out that I had more than one option, which is what my doctor had initially proposed to me. Part 2 talks about, hey, now I know what my options are, and how I advocated for myself, asked questions, and got second and third opinions so that I would feel comfortable with making a decision going forward. Now, Part 3 is going to talk about, now I have all the information that I need, and now I'm going to move forward with actually having the surgery. But guess what? More scenarios took place on which I had to advocate for myself. So stay tuned. We're about to get into it. But again, if you haven't seen Part 1 and 2, I recommend going and watching those first. Okay, now I have my laptop right here because I want to make sure that I'm following my notes. Your girl be talking. I don't want to get sidetracked, okay? But where we're going to start at today is now it's December 9th, okay? December 9th, 2022. I've now flown back to California to have surgery at my previous doctor's office that I had before I moved to Texas. And it was December 9th on a Friday, so there was really nothing to do there. Saturday, nothing to do there. Sunday, I was scheduled for a COVID test because I needed to make sure that I was clear to have surgery. And then I was also scheduled for an MRI scan. Now, I had an MRI scan previously in April, which you'll hear about in my previous videos. But I had to have another one once I got to California just because time had passed from when I had the initial MRI up until this point. And she just wanted to make sure that she was clear on the actual size, the location of the tumor, and all of that stuff. So she scheduled me for those appointments. So Friday and Saturday, like I said, were pretty quiet. Okay, not fully quiet. Okay, I hadn't been home in a little bit, so your girl connected with some of my homegirls, and we did step out. Probably not the best idea to go and hang out and turn up the day before you have like really important appointments. So that was not very responsible of me. But I did go out, and so my COVID test was scheduled on Sunday, December 11th at 9 a.m. And then my MRI scan was scheduled at 10:30 a.m. I woke up at 9:55 a.m., y'all. Yeah, not good. So I jump up. I realize what time it is. I hurry up. I brush my hair in a ponytail, do some sweatpants on, t-shirt, put on my tennis shoes, and I took off, right? So as I'm driving, I had to drive to San Jose. I was in Fremont, which was about a 25-minute drive. So I was definitely pushing the clock. And so I was like really torn on like, do I go get the COVID test and try to see if they can just still squeeze me in, or do I go to the MRI appointment? So I felt like the COVID test was probably going to be a little bit more flexible than getting the MRI done. So I made a conscious decision to just go and get the MRI scan done. So when I showed up, he pretty much had me to change my clothes, put on a robe, you know, you take any metal things off of you, all of that stuff. And right before I went in, I said, oh, I just want to, make you aware that I did have brain surgery back in May of 2020. May of 2020. And I just want to make sure that you're aware of, that in case it may cause any issues with today's scan. So and again, this is why it's just good to speak up and just make sure, all the information is out there, because you don't want to get in a machine and they're like, oh, snap, we missed something, or, oh, you shouldn't have been doing this type of, scan or whatever. So he ended up having me take a seat. He wanted to really dive into my records and talk to the medical records department and everything to make sure that everything was actually good to go, and like the previous doctor. So he ended up, I think it probably took about 20 minutes for him to make the call, but it's worth it, right? To take a seat and make sure that everything is clear. So once he did that, he came back and was like, yeah, I went ahead and checked. Turns out they didn't put anything metal or anything in there, so we're good to go. Okay, so we go inside the MRI room. He has me lay down on this bed, and so I'm laid down to where I'm going in feet first. And so he covers me up with a warm blanket, and he puts me inside the machine. And so when I go inside the machine, he's like talking through the speakers, right? So I can hear his voice. He's like, okay, let me know every time he's going to do a scan and like the sounds that are going to be coming. Y'all, those sounds are very loud. He actually put some little earbuds in so that the sound wouldn't be too bad, but you can still hear it. So I'm inside the machine. He's like walking me through the process. And I would say like halfway through, like my body just started to warm up so much, like I was sweating. And I was trying not to move because it can like affect like how the scans like turn out. So I think I was in there for about an hour, and like I literally felt like I was cooking. So finally towards the end, he was like, okay, this is the last one. And he pulled me out. He was like, oh my God, you're like drenched. The blanket was so wet, like my face was sweating. He was like, are you okay? Because he gave me a button like to press when I went in there. But I'm just thinking this is normal. Even though I had scans before, I don't know. I didn't think that it was really an issue. And he was like, yeah, the MRI machine acts as like a microwave. So it can like overheat your body. He was like, that's why we give you the button to press it. So again, just a note for y'all, use that button if you have to use it. Cause I was trying to be tough. Like I can handle it. And he was like, no. So once I was done with the scan, I pretty much, got dressed and I left. And so then I rushed over to the location where they were doing the COVID test. And when I put up, y'all, it was in the middle of a parking lot. They had like a tent and everything and like a little drive-through. There was nobody there. So I pulled up like, hey, I have an appointment. I didn't even say the time. And they were like, okay, ID. So I gave them my ID. They had me pull through. They just swabbed like one nostril. Like it was very different than like back in the day when like the pandemic was like very fresh. Like they just did a really quick and they were like, yeah, you and your doctor will be notified within 24 hours. I was like, okay, thank you. So thankfully I made it for both y'all. I was good there. So fast forward, now it's Monday and I have a pre-op appointment with my doctor. And this is the first time she and I are actually meeting in person, the one who's actually doing the surgery. And I got there and I arrived like 30 minutes early and the parking lot was just packed. I could not find a parking spot. And so they're calling me like, hey, where are you? And I'm like, I'm trying to find parking. They were like, look, we normally would cancel your appointment at this point, but since you have surgery tomorrow, like we need you to get in here within the next 15 minutes. So I drove around a little bit more to find a parking garage, parked there, and then ran over. Made it there with 1 minute to spare. They were like, okay, we're going to let you in, but now this like decreases the amount of time that you're going to have to talk to the doctor. I was like, understood. So I go in, she comes and introduces herself. She was very nice. And so she's just going over like the procedure, what she's going to do and all that stuff. But she did tell me, hey, like looking at the MRI scan, the tumor has definitely grown a lot since back in April when you had your initial scan. She was like, and because of that, I don't feel comfortable actually doing the surgery with it being this size. I think we need to shrink it. So that means I would have to send you back home. You would take medication for 3 months and then it would shrink down and then you would come back in and we'll do the surgery. And I'm like, we just went through all of this. And I mean, if it's going to risk my life, by any means, like let's push it out. But if there's anything you can do, maybe re-review the scans and see if there's like any chance that you can actually do it this time, like while I'm here. So she went ahead and re-looked at like the images and she was like, you know what, actually I can. And so she decided that she was able to actually do the surgery, but she did give me sort of a disclaimer and was like, since I'm doing this and because of the large size, we're probably going to have to add an additional, like not an additional, but like a vertical incision down the middle. And so it wouldn't be directly all the way down my belly, but it was like the other incisions, it was going to be a total of 5, were like horizontal and they were like 1 inch each, sort of like making a rainbow across my belly. And then right above my belly button, she was going to have to put like a 2 to 3 inch vertical cut to be able to take out the larger section of the tumor. I didn't want that because your girl loved to wear crop tops and show off my belly, but life be life and sometimes you don't have a choice. So I went ahead and agreed. She had me sign off saying that, she had explained everything to me. So she actually stayed longer than she was supposed to because she wanted to make sure that I was comfortable with, moving forward with the surgery. So we stayed for about 30 minutes, felt comfortable. I was like, yes, let's move forward. So now it's Tuesday, right? It's the next day and it's my actual surgery day, December 13th. I'm not really a morning person, y'all. And so like even when I travel, like I'll stay up all night, like just packing my stuff or whatever and getting everything done before I have to leave in the morning, because if I fall asleep, I'll be afraid that I'm like not going to hear the alarm and I'm going to miss my flight, right? So I did the same thing this night. It was Monday night. So I decided to just pull an all-nighter. I didn't go to sleep. I do not recommend this. I didn't know this at the time, but later on they were like, it's actually better to get a good night's rest before you have surgery, because if you don't and then you're ready to have surgery, like it can cause like fatigue and whatnot, and it can be like make the surgery a little bit more challenging. So if you're having major surgery or any kind of surgery, do make sure you get the proper rest beforehand. Now I didn't, so I stayed up all night. My surgery, I was scheduled to show up at 5:30. I ended up staying at my son's house, and so he's the one who drove me in for the surgery. We arrived, and there was no one there to like check us in. So I'm like asking security, and he didn't really know. So we're like walking around, and they're like, no, you have to wait for the front desk people to come to check you in. So even though they asked me to be there at 5:30, they didn't actually show up until like 7 o'clock. So the front desk people come at 7 o'clock. They checked me in. There were like a few other folks that were there getting checked in too. And so once they checked us in, did all the, paperwork and everything, they pretty much told the folks that had brought us there for our surgery, like, hey, give us your name and your phone number. And once we are done with the surgery, we will contact you and let you know when to come and pick them up. And so they pretty much told everybody to leave. I gave my son a hug. He told me he loved me, and he left. Now they took us all up to I think it was like the 4th floor of the hospital. And it was one large room with like 8 beds, all separated by like a curtain. And so they took me to my bed, and everybody was in there for different types of surgery. And so they took me to my bed, and there was like a gown, there was like a little bonnet for my hair, and like the little hospital booties. And so they also asked me to go to the restroom to pee or whatever. So I did that, came back out, I changed and everything, put the bonnet on my head. And so as I'm laying down, like there's this like, I don't know, it looked like aluminum foil, but it was soft. Like it was like a gray, like soft aluminum foil. I don't know how to describe it, but it was like the blanket that they had on top of the bed. So when I laid down and kind of pulled that over me, it just makes you really warm and comfortable. So I'm laying there. And so like all these different nurses and doctors are coming in because they're trying to like prepare you for the surgery. And so like my doctor came and asked me if I had any final questions. I was like, no. And then like this nurse came and checked on me, and then the anesthesiologist came in just to ask me like any questions about like past history. Have I had any issues with previous surgeries? And I explained to her that I was really, really nauseated after I had brain surgery and how sick it made me. So to prevent me from being sick like that this time, she ended up giving me like some nausea pills, and then she put this little sticker thing behind my ear, and so that when I would wake up from the surgery, I wouldn't feel as sick. So after she left, the nurse came and she goes to put the IV in my hand. Now, when she put it in my hand, like I get it, like y'all, this is y'all job. You've probably done this 1,000 times, but it just didn't feel right. Like it's already uncomfortable, but it just didn't feel right. And so I asked her, I was like, hey, is this correct? And she was like, yeah, it's good. So I was like, okay. So then like a couple of minutes later, another nurse walked up while the other nurse who had put my IV in is standing there, and she was like, hey, the drip looks kind of slow. Are you sure the IV is okay? She was like, yeah, it's good. I've already checked it. So I said, are y'all sure? Now, mind you, I asked her once. Now this other nurse is coming up and saying, hey, I don't think that's right. And she's like, no, it's fine. So now like, everything's pretty much wrapping up, and it's time for me to like actually head into the room. So the nurse takes me to the room, and when I get rolled in, there's probably like 8 to 10 people in there. So they roll me in, and while I'm in there, like, they start like recording, and it was like a audio recording, and they all went around the room like announcing their name and their role and their purpose for the surgery or whatever. And so the anesthesiologist had to pretty much sign off and everything before they can even get started. So she walked in, right, and she introduced herself on the recording, and she looks at the IV and says, the IV drip is too slow. This is 3 times, y'all, okay, that not only I tried to advocate for myself, but another nurse tried to advocate for me. Now the anesthesiologist is advocating for me. She's like, the drip is too slow. The nurse who put the IV in says, no, I've already checked, it's fine. The anesthesiologist goes on to say, no, If the drip is slow, that means that when I give her the anesthesia medicine to put her under, if the drip was too slow, it's not going to put her under deep enough the way she should be, and she may possibly wake up during the surgery. Y'all, you see what I'm saying? Like, I was just glad that there was somebody else to like speak up, because sometimes we don't know. We don't always know the right questions to ask, or like, you know, what's right, what's wrong. So having people that's really looking out for you and that's going to speak up on your behalf is really important. I was just glad that the nurse and then the anesthesiologist stepped up and said, no, it's not right. So they went ahead, they took it out, they fixed it, put it back, and then she was like, okay, thumbs up, we're good to go. So next thing you know, I hear 10, 9, 8. I was out, y'all, knocked out. Next thing you know, I'm waking up and I'm back in the little room where I was initially. And my doctor's like, everything was successful. Everything was good. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And, you know, fortunately, because they gave me the nausea pills and a little sticker thing behind my ear, I didn't feel sick at all. I was heavily sedated right still. So I didn't really feel any pain in my stomach, but she would just tell me that she didn't have to give me as big of an incision down the middle as she thought. I think I mentioned before that she had said it was going to be like 2 to 3 inches. It was actually going to be down the center of my stomach, but she said that she was able to do it with just a 2 to 3 inch like incision above my stomach. Above my belly button. So all of that worked out, and she was like, you know, yeah, the tumor was much larger than I thought. You know, it was probably about 10 to 11 pounds. And she was just like, you know, you're going to feel so much better. You're not going to have any more back pains. You're not going to have any more, you know, lower like pelvic pain, because, you know, that's a lot of weight. It's like carrying 2 kids, like you're pregnant. And so, yeah, y'all, that's pretty much how that wrapped up. And so my son, they ended up contacting him to come pick me up. And let me just make sure I didn't miss anything, because I have not been looking back at my screen. Yeah, so, yep, that pretty much covers all of that. So now it's time for me to go home, and I go back to my son's house, and he had picked up my medicine before he came to the hospital to get me. They told him where to go pick up the prescription, but I guess one of them was not ready yet, and he forgot to go back and pick it up. So when we when we got back to his house, he realized he didn't have my pain medication, which was like one of the biggest, like, you know, things that I needed outside of the antibiotics. And so like I'm laying there, y'all, and as the medication is wearing off, I swear it felt like I had done like 5,000 sit-ups. My stomach was in so much pain, like it was bad. And so rather than driving all the way back to San Jose from his house, they ended up just transferring the prescription to a different location closer to him. But we couldn't pick it up to the next morning. So I just had some ibuprofen, and that kind of held me over slightly, you know, that evening or whatever. But I stayed there for like a week, maybe about 5 days after the surgery, just to make sure. She wanted to make sure that like if I was flying, that I wasn't going to clot, and that, you know, I would be able to move around and stuff. So I left maybe like 5 days later, and once I flew back, I made sure like I stood up every 30 minutes and walked down the aisle just to make sure that my blood was flowing and everything. And yeah, when I got back home, everything was good. And, you know, she and I had 2 follow-up appointments. One when I got back home, and then one a month after I had the surgery. And so ultimately it was a successful surgery, but again, even still having to advocate for yourself, making sure that, you know, everything is right. I mean, we don't always know, so it's easier said than done to be like, yeah, speak up for yourself. Again, if it wasn't for the anesthesiologist speaking up and saying, you know, that it was an issue, I probably would have had some issues during the actual surgery itself. But yeah, y'all, that is it. Please, if you have any questions, you know, drop them down below. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I know that this is a really big deal for a lot of women, specifically Black women. And there's not really a lot of information out there on like the process, procedures, you know, risk factors, the different options that you have. That's why I want to put this video out here to let you know that, you know, when doctors tell you you have to have a hysterectomy,